Clara in the corner.
Okay. All right, let's get started, you guys. All right, so welcome to Love Rising today, you guys. Clara and I are so excited because this is our first podcast that we've ever been in the same space for. And of course, we're doing our videos now so everybody can watch us on YouTube. And so we have Summer Innanen, and we are so excited to have her here. This one's been a long time coming, and we're just very grateful. So a little bit about Summer. She's a professionally trained coach specializing in body image, self-worth, and confidence. We love that. Of course, if you've listened to any of our podcasts, you know that. She is the best-selling author of Body Image Remix and creator of the You on Fire online program dedicated to helping women break out of the diet culture cage and like their fiery free lives. She is also the host of Fearless Rebel Radio, a podcast dedicated to anti-dieting, body positivity, and feminism, all the things we love. So welcome, Summer. We're so excited and so grateful to chat with you a little bit about just giving yourself permission today and whatever else kind of comes up for us.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So what we would love to kind of know is share your story, how you got to where you are, and kind of all the little hiccups or whatever came up for you on this journey.
Sure. So, my story, I guess I'll talk about my body image story because it's probably the most relevant one that leads to why I do the work I do. Growing up, I was never a confident kid. I was just really shy, and I don't remember a time where I felt good in my body. And, there were a lot of reasons for that. There were a lot of factors that drove me to feel that way. Obviously, living in a culture that tells women that thinner is better and that our attractiveness really defines our worth and our value as a person. But my mom was a chronic dieter, and, she really struggled with body image. So I think I picked up on a lot of the kind of thoughts and behaviors that she had too. And I was bullied a lot for my body. And so it really just, I just never felt good in my body. And I thought that in order to be confident and popular and, have a boyfriend and all these other things, I had to change my body. I thought if I change my body, then my life will be good. Then I'll be confident. I'll be this whole other person. And so that really triggered me to start dieting when I started to kind of try to manipulate my body when I was around the age of 13. That's when I started to, play around with exercising with the sole purpose of losing weight and dieting. And that really progressed and got a lot worse in my early 20s. And that's when I, started to do more extreme things because I still wasn't happy. Anytime I lost a bit of weight, I would receive some validation, but it was never enough. And I still didn't feel good. I still would look at myself in the mirror and pick myself apart and, not want to see my body in photos. And I was stepping on the scale compulsively. And so it drove me to really have kind of a disordered relationship with food, and in particular, have a really messed up relationship with exercise. So exercise was kind of the one thing that was my coping mechanism that I used quite compulsively to try to manipulate my body, unsuccessfully most of the time, but because you can't mess around with biology. But and I did that for years, and then it to the extent that I went back to school to become a nutritionist because I was so fixated on health. I'm going to put health in quotation marks because it wasn't really healthy. It was always focused around weight loss, and everything kind of came to a head for me when I started to experience some health problems. So I hadn't had a period in a long time, and I just wasn't feeling very good, and my body just wasn't responding to any of my weight loss attempts, which I thought was a problem at the time, but it was actually my body just doing what it's supposed to do, which is keep body fat on your body in response to a famine. So anyways, I went to see a bunch of doctors, and I finally found a naturopath who was like, okay, what you're doing is actually, really harming you. And, your hormone levels are the same as a postmenopausal woman. And And that was really my wake up call moment when I realized I had a problem, because I always thought that everything I was doing was healthy. Again, using healthy in quotation marks. A lot of the stuff I did was given to me by personal trainers or people in the kind of that sort of field. So, you know, like these heavily restricted caloric diets were given to me by individuals who I trusted. And I don't blame them. I think that's diet culture. But I honestly thought that was like what everyone was supposed to do. And, you know, in hindsight, I'm like, I was really feeding myself like a seagull and not like a grown-ass woman. And so that's when everything changed for me, because I realized I needed to really work on my body image. Like it wasn't the food that was the problem. It wasn't like how I was exercising. It wasn't my body. It was the way I felt about my body. And more importantly, the layer under that is just the way I felt about myself. You know, my body size had kind of defined my worth for my entire life. And so it was really a process of getting to know myself again, and letting go of all the kind of external validation that I was seeking, and learning to just accept all the different parts of myself. And, you know, through the process, it was just such a freeing process. It was really a process of liberation and a process of reclaiming my independence from this, you know, oppressive culture. And through that, it really lit this fire under me to want to be able to help others in the same capacity. So I shifted my business from, instead of being nutrition focused, to, you know, I went back and did a couple different coaching programs, life coaching programs. And now I help other women who are in a similar position to really break free of all of the different kind of expectations and standards they've put on themselves, and help them know that their worth doesn't lie in the size of their body, and help them just live the fulfilling lives that they had sort of believed were dependent on the size of their body, and like get them to live those lives now.
I love that. Well, I love how you talk so much about like freedom, and really like we're going back to kind of giving yourself that permission. And it sounds like as you went through this journey, you did give yourself a lot of permission from one step to the next to the next. So can you kind of explain what that really meant for you, and what kind of giving yourself permission means when it comes to breaking free, when it comes to finding this new path and retraining our thoughts and kind of getting out of this, as you call it, the diet culture cage, which I love?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think, you know, if you think about it this way, like we have been given this script of who we should be as women. You know, we've been given this list of kind of cultural expectations and it's all based on the construct of the perfect female, or the female ideal. And so that really encompasses so many different things. It's like, okay, you have to look a certain way, you have to act a certain way. Oh, you have to be this kind of mother, you have to be this kind of friend, you have to be this kind of partner, you have to be this kind of worker, and your house needs to look like this, and you really need to be able to do it all and have it all and look a certain way. And you know, it's because of that you know, this construct of the female ideal, which is really like just such a fallacy, because it doesn't actually give you anything, even if you check off all those boxes. Because of that, you know, we put all this pressure on ourselves to be someone we're not. And so giving yourself permission is about breaking free of all of those different expectations. What if, you know, if we use like the metaphor of a cage, it's like breaking each bar of the cage. So it's like, okay, no, I'm going to give myself permission to let my body be what it's going to be. I'm going to give myself permission to be the mother that feels right for me. I'm going to give myself permission to, you know, to live my career the way I want it to be. And so we start to break free of all those things. And in order to do that, we're breaking free of these expectations. And it's not an easy thing to do, because we're going against who we, and it puts us sometimes in more of a vulnerable position, because it exposes us to potential, like, well, judgment. What are other people going to think of you if you're doing something different than everybody else? Or, if you're not participating in that culture, like, what are people going to think of you? Are they going to think you're unhealthy or lazy or all these things, right? Because that's what we've been taught to believe. And so, in terms of giving yourself permission, like for me, that was the essence of so much of what I had to do. It was like giving my body permission to just be what it was going to be and accept that, and give myself permission to accept all the different facets of myself, the ones that maybe I don't like, which is really a foundation of self-worth. It's accepting all the different components of ourselves, even if we don't like them, but knowing we're still worthy regardless of that. And then on a deeper level too, like on a very individual level, it's about giving yourself permission to identify your needs and your desires, and have those things and go after those things, and your values as a person too, and giving yourself permission to live a life aligned with your values and honor your values. And all of those things can be super vulnerable because, if you think about your needs, well, you might have to set some boundaries. You might have to say no. You might have to ask for what you want in order to do that. And for a lot of us, that's really intimidating. That's really scary. It exposes us to potential rejection or to potential judgment. And I think that's why so many of us are holding back on doing that. And so, I always talk about this concept of kind of like giving yourself balance, giving yourself permission, and how that really relates to acceptance. So I think it really is, like I said, the essence of so much of what helped me and so much of what I teach as well.
So I have a question that I'm just going to kind of like talk through a little bit. I haven't fully formed it, but there's a part of the question is, what does that look like in daily life? Like for a woman who has, gotten a lot of validation through her body, kind of been in that mindset of the diet mentality, or like needing to be a certain size, needing to have a certain house, needing to have certain clothes, all these things. How does that look like on a daily, basis to give yourself permission? And then also there's something around like feminine, like women, right? And this fear of judgment, like this deep, deep bedrock emotional fear of being judged, because I'll do some kind of psychotherapy work with my clients, and we get to these like root fears. And one of the root fears, like beyond even death in a lot of senses, is being judged or like abandoned by a family, by friends. So like, how do those fears, play into this need for physical body validation or material, I guess, kind of material validation?
Yeah. Okay, cool. So two different, like I'll answer one. And then if I'm like, what was that other one again? Just remind me and I'll come to it. So first one, how does it look in daily life? I think the way I like to teach it, or the way I like to look at it, is for people to be really aware, start to become really aware of what I call their shoulds. So your shoulds are, I should be this, I should be doing that. So to be really specific, I should be thinner. Oh, I shouldn't eat that. I should clean my house. I should be more productive. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't be so sensitive. I shouldn't be so loud. I should want to have sex. Like all of these different things, our shoulds are really driven by those cultural expectations. And so, I always say your shoulds are a manifestation of the voice of your inner critic. And so I get clients to really start to identify those. Some shoulds are okay. I mean, should we pay our taxes? Yeah. Should you shovel your driveway if you have snow? Yeah, probably. Or your sidewalk, but the ones that I'm referring to are the ones that really make us feel like we're not good enough if we're not doing these things. The ones that really create these feelings of inadequacy, of shame, of guilt inside of us. Those are the ones that I want people to watch out for. And then, what we can start to do on a daily basis is just be aware of these thoughts, and then question them. Like, is that what I want to do? Is that what what I need right now? So let's take it in the context of say something like food. So someone saying to themselves like, oh, I shouldn't eat that. Well, it's like, let's tune in. Do you want to eat that? Like, does your body want that right now? And then, start to follow what your body wants, what you want, what your desires are, and question any kind of hesitations that come up around it. So it's like, well, why do you feel like you shouldn't? Is it because you're afraid of, what might happen to your body, or, and then there's like a whole other kind of unpacking that needs to go along with that. But, that's how I approach it on a more practical, instructional, here's something that everyone can do with this information. Because, when I start working with clients, I always have them do what I call the big should dump. And I'm like, just dump all your shoulds on me. And I have them really list out all the things that they think they should be doing or should be saying. And it's crazy. It's sorry, that's an ableist word I shouldn't use. There's a should that I will follow. But anyways, it's ridiculous. And I have them kind of imagine, almost like carrying around this suitcase or this backpack of all of their shoulds. And this retreat that I ran with one of my partners, Sarah, last year, she we actually had people write them all out and then we had them burn them. So, but I think if you can kind of see the gravity of the weight that you're carrying around with all of these shoulds, you can start to see how much of an emotional weight that is to carry around. And then really imagine, okay, what would it be like if I didn't have those? And that's where we can give ourselves permission to start to, take those out of our lives and do the things that are really more aligned with our needs and desires. So does that answer your first question?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I guess something that I would kind of add on to that or like ask in further detail is how, like, what a thing I always get with clients, a rebuttal to that kind of idea, because I kind of do that same process, like what are you thinking you should do, is what's the difference between letting go of those things and giving up, right? Because I'll have women that'll say, well, that just feels like I'm giving up, right? And I would love to hear what you kind of think about that.
Yeah, well, I think, again, that's like the narrative that we've been told. It's like, all right, if you're not living by these rules, if you're not aligned, if you're not obeying all these things, then everything's going to be unruly and you're going to let yourself go. And I mean, that's all just a bunch of bullshit. You know, and I mean, it's been studied, like self-criticism is not a motivator for change, self-compassion. So, being really nurturing towards ourselves leads to greater positive changes in people's lives. And it's not taking a toll on your self-worth. And I think that, it's about helping people to understand that, talking about cultivating self-trust and self-care. And the thing is that our trust has been broken because we've been told we can't trust ourselves. So we don't believe we can trust ourselves. We think like, well, if I'm not following this playbook, then yeah, everything's going to fall apart. So it's this process of relearning how to trust ourselves. And so I think it's about like taking it step by step and really just kind of, proving to yourself that you can trust yourself, that everything will be okay. And that when you are doing things from a place of compassion and respect for yourself, then you're going to do things that are going to be more positive for your entire well-being, not just physical, but like mental, emotional, because that part of the equation is huge. I mean, shitting all over yourself is not good for your emotional well-being. So it's like, what are you really doing for yourself there if you're shitting all over yourself? So that's what that's how I typically respond to that. And I think, it's really, there's this quote from Linda Bacon, I think, says it in Health at Every Size. And she's like, you're not giving up, you're moving on. And I think yeah. And she's using that in response to not dieting, but I believe we can use that in response to anything related to this, is that we're not giving up, we're moving on. And getting people to really connect with like the vision of what they want for themselves, and then starting to take action to move towards that vision instead of really being aligned to, what their inner critic wants for them, and which is based on, this kind of construct of the female ideal. So do you want me to answer that other part about the fear? Okay. So, Okay. So the question was around, can you just kind of recap it so I can
Yeah.
respond to
So
it
just
entirely?
I guess no, I it was like they weren't exactly related, but I felt like there was they were just coming to me at the same time. So um like the fact, I guess it's just like speaking to the fact of that a lot of women, their deepest fear is judgment. Beyond a lot of things that we might think might be more scary, like dying, for example.
Right. Okay. Yes. Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. So in our DNA, because throughout time, as women, our survival was dependent on being likable. When we didn't have independence, we had to rely on somebody else for our lives like, to live. And that was, the way that we achieved that was by being likable and just obeying, and so it's in our DNA to need to be liked. And so that's why that fear of judgment is so deeply rooted. And I think one of the biggest fears to really overcome for individuals. So I think, even understanding it from that perspective can be really helpful. It's like, oh, okay, like this is what we've been told. And the way that sort of looks in our modern day society is, sorry, I might sneeze. Sorry. Okay. The way that looks in our modern day culture is, likability is so heavily intertwined with being desirable or being attractive. And so that really connects to the way that we feel about our bodies. So we're so, we are so tied to wanting to be attractive or wanting to be desirable, because, in kind of the deeper layers of our subconscious, like our survival really depends on it. I mean, naturally, we all have this need to belong. Every human being does. Every human being has a need to belong and a need to be accepted, which is completely valid. And it's not about saying like, all right, I want you to get rid of this need to feel like you belong or this need to feel accepted. Yeah. But it's really about helping people understand that, okay, fear of judgment, not your fault, like totally normal to feel that way. But let's really look at how that's impacting what you want in your life and how you're living your life. And start to make changes to become more comfortable with potential judgment, and also really questioning, like, are you really being judged, or is this just kind of the assumption? A lot of times it's assumptions that we're making. We think people are saying things or thinking things, and I mean sometimes they are. That's true. And then it's a question of what boundaries can you set to eliminate those people from your life? But it's more comfortable with potential judgment, knowing that it doesn't define your worth as an individual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's what's really important, and I always remind my clients, is if somebody is judging you, like who's taking care of their life, or for them, and in the opposite way, if you're judging, like who's taking care of this stuff over here. So just remembering to disconnect those two. I kind of like touching on the idea of kind of reshaping that generational thought pattern, and kind of the thing that I want to know is like what might come up mentally, spiritually, when you allow yourself to recognize that a lot of these beliefs that we have are generational and they've been passed down to us. But then how do we kind of move through the spiritual direction of allowing them to come up so they can go, so we can kind of, like you said, move through them instead of give up on them?
Yeah. So I think, this is where having compassion really comes into play, because it's not about, pushing these thoughts away or telling them to shut up. I'm not one of those, I don't really agree with people who are like, oh, just tell your inner critic to shut up. I'm like, no. Let's just actually be curious as to why it's showing up, because it's there for a reason and it's really trying to protect us. And so we can just kind of acknowledge those fears and those beliefs and be curious with them, and, you know, in our particular situation, be like, okay, what is this telling me I need right now? You know, because so many of these things are, yes, they're deeply embedded in us, but also, you know, they were reinforced in us through experiences we had when we were kids. You know, if we were rejected when we were a kid, if we were judged when we were a kid, if we were bullied when we were a kid, you know, those experiences and those parts of ourselves are still in us. And I think often those then pop up as manifestations of our inner critic. Like they come up as the voice of our inner critic. And so if we can almost see it as this inner part of ourselves, and then ask ourselves like, okay, well, what does that part of me need to hear? Like if there's a part of me that's really afraid of judgment, what can I do to comfort that part of me? What can I say to comfort that part of me? You know, what do I want to do instead? Like, how can I carry this fear along with me in this journey and still do the things I want to do, like acknowledging that its existence is going to be there. So I know I'm talking kind of like woo-woo and high level, but the way I always tell people is like, imagine there's like this scared child inside of you. Yeah. And imagine there's a scared child inside of you and it's tugging on your arm and you need to comfort that child. Like, you're not going to shut up, you're not going to kick it away. You're not going to get angry at it, because all that's going to do is exasperate that fear. So you need to, you know, think about, okay, what am I going to do to carry this child along with me, make sure that they know that everything is safe now, I've got their back, we're going to take care of you, you're okay, you know, all these things that we need to give ourselves in order to live with those fears, because we can't get rid of these wounds completely. Like, we can't just eliminate the experiences that we had.
Yeah, that's something in my own personal journey that I saw. It was like there was initially a lot of self kind of hatred, a lot of that really loud inner critic voice that had been driving a lot of my actions for so long. And then when I kind of stepped back and started to look at my shoulds and started to look at my inner critic, and I love that you're using this language too, because I do voice dialogue, which is a type of psychotherapy where we give voice to different parts of ourselves. And what I found that was kind of like, once I kind of got a little bit more aware of that inner critic voice, like coming in and not telling it to shut up, but getting more curious, like disengaging from it a little bit. It's like I used to kind of be hooked in and I was like on the back of the inner critic, like, all right, let's go. Like, this is the way I motivate myself, right? And then it was like I kind of unhooked, like got off the back and like was kind of just looking at it, you know, walking around it, kind of being like, what is this voice and why is it here? And what really started to show up for me was a scared child. Like, it was like behind that inner critic was this like really hurt little girl. And it was sad at first, but then now it's like, I'm so grateful for that relationship that I have with that part of me, right? It's like I took that part of me back and I got to start to take care of it again. And that is like, there is almost like a mothering type of love now, right? It's like I get to take care of myself. I get to hold myself if I feel that, like, those feelings that used to come up, that then the inner critic would, you know, come in and start to control the situation. So the pain, kind of to try to protect the pain. So I don't know. It's kind of, like
exactly
higher level stuff, but it's like, yeah, that's exactly how it feels. And now I feel so much like love towards that part of me, you know? And that's
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's really just about creating like this, you know, softer, more nurturing relationship with ourselves. You know, it's not about like, I think when people think confidence, they think, okay, it's like you need to just kind of boot camp instruct yourself into confidence. Like, come on, like, let's do it. Like, you just, you know, all the stuff. And it's actually a lot softer than that. You know, like you said, it's about, sometimes it's about feeling harder feelings and really getting to the stuff that prevents us from, you know, doing those things we do, and then being that nurturing, motherly voice to ourselves that, you know, a lot of us maybe had or didn't have. Like, everybody's situation is different, and I think even if you had that, you still need to cultivate that relationship with yourself today, you know, and if you didn't have that, like, then it's even more important to like give yourself all those things that you didn't receive when you needed it.
Yeah, totally. Exactly.
I love that. I like this, that everything does tie back to like the giving the permission. And so I'm so glad that that's, what you talk about in one of your big messages. But one thing that I think people forget to kind of think about is what happens if I give myself permission? Like, what could be created? What could manifest? What have you seen and what have you experienced with that?
I think it can be a lot of different, it can be a lot of different things. So it's not always positive. I think sometimes the biggest acts of self-love can be hurtful, but there's discomfort in staying put too. So, I'll talk about kind of the two sides of it. So I think, there's circumstances where it's about giving yourself permission to break off a relationship that's not serving you. And that really hurts, but ultimately that's going to feel a lot more freeing. And there's discomfort staying where you are too. So I think I always ask people to really measure the discomfort of staying where they are versus the discomfort of taking the action. And I'm like, well, there's discomfort other ways. So which one do you want to choose? Like, which one's going to lead to a better outcome down the road? And so I don't like to say like giving yourself permission is just always going to lead to like freedom and joy and all this stuff, because it's not always the case. Sometimes giving yourself permission like leads to putting yourself under the fire, or putting yourself in the ring, as like Brene Brown would say. And I think that all of those things really help us to grow as individuals and build resiliency, and we need to be doing more of that. And so on the flip side, I think it can lead to a lot of awesome things, like in particular freedom. I think freedom more than anything, because we free ourselves of kind of living inside that cage, as I use that metaphor. We free ourselves of those shoulds. We free ourselves of a lot of those the narratives around doubting ourselves or thinking we're not good enough. And so more specifically, being able to, and I'll use like a couple different examples, but being able to go on vacation for the first time and actually enjoy it without being so worried about what other people are thinking, or hiding your body, or being afraid of the food. Like that, like I hear clients have those experiences all the time, and it's awesome. I'm like, you're living your life now. Like, that's amazing. And then on a deeper level, like sometimes I'll have clients who go on to do stuff because they've given themselves permission to just, free themselves of all of these kind of diet culture thoughts and who they think they should be. They go on to do really awesome things. Like, one of my clients went on to become a foster mom, and she's like, I never would have done that, like, ever. And so it goes beyond just the sort of, I don't want to say superficial, because I think it's really important for people to still do things like show up in photographs and, bikini to the beach. But there's a deeper layer to it that comes with that. And I think that's where, because you've got all this additional mental space, that you can connect with, your purpose and what you want out of life and have a more fulfilling life. And whether that means you do something really bold, like become a foster parent, or whether that means you're just more present with kids, I think the outcome of that is certainly a sense of freedom, a sense of empowerment, and just a sense of fulfillment. Like your life just feels more fulfilling because you're more present and you're living it. So yeah, did that answer your question? I might have just gone off on a bit of a tangent in a different direction.
I love that you touched on like, it's not all fluffy, right? Like there is pain in the transformation.
Yeah.
That is so important, because a lot of people just think, well, as soon as I quit my job and I go just say this, but come be a health coach, like smooth sailing, like I'm going to give myself permission. But it's like, no, there's growing pains, and there's like, that's the beautiful part about it, right? That's what life is all about. So I'm glad you talked about both of those.
Yeah. I think we're looking for balance. We're looking for a balance. We're not looking for all positive. Like that's not what I'm all about. And I think, I always say some of the biggest acts of self-love are the most difficult. And I think most of us can kind of relate to that in our lives, whether that was quitting a job where we weren't being respected, or, leaving a relationship where where it wasn't serving us or we weren't being respected, setting boundaries with family members, that's really hard sometimes. It's not always easy, but it is the most rewarding in the long term. And I think that's what we have to look at. It's like, how do you want your life to be? Do you want your life to be, about being more loyal to your fears, or do you want your life to be about being more loyal to do that really matter to you and showing yourself that you matter?
I think that one thing that's really, really good in this too is like a lot of people think they're so stuck, and nobody is stuck. And I think that when we go back to how we talked about shoulds, that, I don't know, maybe you agree, but that's like kind of the first step. If somebody's like listening to this podcast and thinking, oh, that's all so great and that sounds fun, but I'm really stuck in this situation, like I can't just do any of these things. Do you think kind of the first little step is just saying, okay, what are your shoulds? Put 2.5 pounds in a backpack for every single one and wear it. No, I'm kidding. That's what you need to do.
Yeah, that could be really heavy. Yes. Yeah. I think it's a really good first step. And I think it's about picking. So here's the thing. You're never going to wake up and be like, all right, I'm ready to make that change today. Like you just,
right.
Confidence, or taking action like that. You never feel ready, because anytime that we step outside our comfort zone, our inner critic is going to show up. And so it's about knowing that, you're going to have to acknowledge the fear and feel the fear and do it anyways. And so I push people to take one small step to experience that, to feel fear and do it anyway. So if you're feeling stuck, then, is there one small thing that you could do differently? Just one small thing, whether it's, I'm going to, I don't know, ask for help or ask for what I need today, or I'm just going to eat the thing I want today. Like really small. That's it. And then that's how we start to build resiliency and build confidence and know that everything's going to be okay when we start to take these steps and appreciate what can happen when we do. And so, becoming aware of the shoulds is definitely an important step in that. And then starting to take small little actions to move towards what we want, so that we're being outside of our comfort zone, but not like on a different planet, because I think sometimes that can be paralyzing or just too much emotional discomfort in that. So I'm always trying to find like that right spot with my clients where I push them outside their comfort zone, but it's not like pushing them to a place where they're going to just be paralyzed with anxiety and fear, because that's not really helpful either. So it's kind of about and that's very individual, but I think it's often hard for us to push ourselves. It's hard for us to do that because the fear is there, and we're like, well, the fear is there, so I'm not going to do it. And so knowing that fear is always going to be there is important. But then also, trying to have a support system or someone to help you do it can be really, really helpful too.
And like for people out there, I think it's important to note that like it is hard, but it does get easier. Like when the pattern is to feel, I kind of call them the rings of fear. It's like, there's always going to be another ring. Like it's never like, oh, I got past it and now I'm, in the meadow frolicking. It's like, there's always going to be another ring. And so we're always kind of like the idea of life, right? It's like push up against those rings. And at first it is hard. It's always hard. But I feel like there's when you kind of make a paradigm shift and you're like, oh, this is what I'm doing. Like, this is the point, right? I'm pushing up against these rings of fear so that I can get to the next one, so that I can get to the next one. And that it gets easier. Like, it's like practice, it's like you just practice. You practice the thing you're scared of. You practice by going out in a bikini. You practice. You're just practicing, pushing.
Exactly. And I think it's a process of building resiliency. Like that's what it is. It's building the strength to then, know that you can do that, and then comforting yourself no matter what the outcome is, which I think is really important too. So that's where I where I really encourage people to, don't go hard on yourself. Like, let's detach from the outcome. What can you just appreciate about this experience? What can you learn from it? What can you be proud of, regardless of what happened? And if a part of you is hurt by what happened, then, what do you need to heal that part? And in order to then go out and do it again, because we don't want to just have an experience where you felt the fear, you did it anyways, you ended up being judged, and then you never do it again. So I think it's really important to have that piece of it in place too. Because here's the thing, like, our culture isn't going to change. Like, I hope it does. Yeah. But I don't think it probably will in our lifetime. I think there's always just small changes happening, but it's just, we live in a culture that's really fixated on, dieting and thinness and, women's appearances. And yes, things are starting to change, but it is really slow. And so, we're gonna still have to exist in this culture. So it's about strengthening ourselves to be able to do that, knowing that, we might still be living in a place where we feel odd one out, or we feel judged because of the circumstances of our society, not because.
Oh, can you say that last part again? I think we might have cut out.
I think it was, what I said was, knowing that you're not a problem. So, like, knowing that, like, the culture is the problem, that you're not a problem. And that's really important for people to reinforce within themselves.
Mm-hmm. And like that, it's a courageous thing to do this, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a courageous act. It's a rebellious act. It's a revolutionary act to value your own judgment over the society that you're in, right? Like,
totally.
It's definitely not, it's not like the easiest way to go, but it is fulfilling. And
it's not the safe route.
Right. It's not the safe route. Exactly. And it's, so amazing. Mm-hmm. So should we ask, do you have anything going on right now? Do you have any programs to promote? Like, how can people find you? How do you want to connect with people?
Sure. So, everything's on my website, which is at summerinnanen.com, or you can just go to thebodyimagecoach.com. I have programs there. I have a month-long program that's called Body Image Remix, which is based on the book and steps that you can take to set a foundation for a better body image. My You on Fire program won't run again until next year, because I'm pregnant. I'm a kid in the fall, so I won't be running it again in the fall like I normally do. But you can put your name on the wait list for that on my website. Like, there's just a tab that says work with me there. And then my podcast is Fearless Rebel Radio. And then I'm on all different platforms, social media, Instagram and Facebook primarily. And my book you can find on my website too. It's called Body Image Remix, or it is on Amazon if you want paperback too. But there's an audio version that's available on my website.
Awesome. Yes. And I think, your podcast is amazing, for, the people that are listening to this. Obviously they listen to podcasts, so check that out. And there is something actually I wanted to add, that like sisterhood is, finding other women that are doing this thing too is like so powerful, because yes, we do come up against judgment. And we might have painful experiences as we go through this, and balancing those out with good experiences with women who are on the same journey, who are talking about the same things, filling our ears and our social media with those types of people can be huge. Because I know that, if I'm scrolling through Instagram and there's a lot of stuff that can trigger you. So, kind of being proactive about how you're consuming media is so important. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's huge. It is huge. Oh, and I should mention, I have a free body confidence over on my website too. So for people who just want to get a taste of like what I suggest, that's there, and that's like really easy to find on my site.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Summer. It was so awesome just to chat with you today and spend some time. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
I'm I'm trying. This is funny because we're